Well, big breaking news update for you folks. Well, we were talking yesterday. I don't know if you were there for our dugout show, but we did mention that today would be a big day for Indian sport. You'd see a Sumit Nagal in action in the first round of the Australian Open, and of course, pretty much no one was expecting him to actually be in with a fighting chance in this match. Usually, the draw is very unfair to someone who's qualified through the qualifiers because you play those three matches, you're unseeded, and you will always be assigned to someone who was in fact seeded. But the big breaking news update is that Sumit Nagal has caused an upset for the ages, and he's defeated Alexander Bublik, who is the world number 27 and was seeded 31st in this particular edition of the Australian Open. Alexander Bublik has been hit by a straight set loss, not even a loss of, let's say, small proportions, or it was a hard fought loss, one that went the distance, 5 sets. That's something, in fact, in a way, it's good for Sumit that he took the match in straight sets, because I think the longer it went, the longer it would have gone, I think it would have favored Bublik more, because again, Alexander Bublik, someone who has experience of regularly playing in Grand Slams, and of course has in fact, let's say, he's had the experience of playing in matches that go longer than the traditional 3-set games, because of course in Grand Slams it's always 5-setters. That is the name of the hour. But this is a massive, massive moment, and our sports fan rightfully points out that this is the first time since 1989 that an Indian singles player has defeated a seeded player in a Grand Slam. It's been very, very long. It's been a moment that is in many ways historic and has been a long time coming, because again, when you talk about glories of Indian tennis, particularly in the early 2000s or late 2000s, the conversation always revolved around what it is that was, let's say, the doubles, whether it is women's doubles, men's doubles, mixed doubles. That was the source of tennis glory for India. Unfortunately, when it came to singles, you haven't really had a major single star. The only two you had, or you came close to having in, let's say, this particular time period, of course, you had Sania Mirza in the early 2000s. Thereafter, you had a Somdev Devarman. But that's it. You've not really had anyone come into the singles side and actually look to make a splash. Sumit Nagal has been the person who's come, let's say, closest, let's say, to actually competing regularly in the Grand Slams. Although, again, as I pointed out, that's something that's easier said than done. But again, we'll talk about all of that much later. Let's quickly go over how it is the match played out. Now, again, if you're looking at where I think Sumit Nagal really set the tone, the first one, let's say, the first set which was played out, yes, it was pretty even Stevens, but Nagal ended up winning out where it mattered the most, 6-4. It's a close victory, but it's a clinical one, because again, it didn't end up going to a tiebreak, or didn't end up going the way of, say, a 7-5, which does tend to happen sometimes in a tennis game. Before you avoid the tiebreak, someone just ends up breaking. 6-4, that's great. The second set, though, was where things got really, really good, because again, he was in that second set and ended up having multiple break points, 1-6-2. At that point, you're thinking, okay, Bublik definitely is not, let's say, in, feeling these conditions. And he did seem to be struggling with the conditions. It's a little hot in Melbourne, but the conditions are the same for everyone. Nagal, to his credit, gutted it through those conditions. Bublik, on the other hand, was not only struggling with the conditions, more importantly, also struggled for rhythm. And that I will give Nagal full credit for, because he was on his game throughout. His returns were very, very good. Some of his returns were next level, especially I remember that one return, which was cross-court. And there was another return which was so good down the side, that it was so good that even Bublik himself, after being beaten by the return, had to just look at Nagal and just with a very grim face actually applaud him. Imagine hitting a shot that good that your opponent actually ends up applauding you. That was just how good Nagal's return was. The third set, though, was where things started to get a little hairy, and you can understand why that is the case. Because again, with Sumit Nagal, he's had a lot of experience of playing in the lower division. So of course, there's he's played challengers, he's played stuff like that. But again, consistently at ATP level or even at Grand Slam level, it hasn't been a thing. And just to discuss this entire, let's say, or what is the historic day with us, we have Nikhil here. Nikhil, am I audible?
Yeah, I was struggling to get into the link, and I was just going to send you a message saying that, it's not allowing me. It's like saying you're blocked to enter the link. But finally,
Okay.
I've had to toil, work really hard, not as much as Sumit Nagal, who I would say had a breeze to that victory. Watching that entire match, I, when he won the first set, I was like, okay, maybe, the first set, and it's going to be
Mhm.
tough from there on. And usually the most superior players do bounce back, they come back. And I was like, sooner or later it's going to happen with Nagal as well. But from there on, he won the second set and won the second set even more convincingly. But
Exactly.
even then, I had my doubts because I've seen this, go down earlier as well. The more superior player, the better player does come back, and you will here or maybe at other spots. But it didn't happen. Third set, serving for that set, and I was like, but when he lost that, when he was serving and lost that, I was like, that's
Mhm.
it. This was that foot in the door that a seeded player like Bublik needed, and that's going to be the end of it. But the way he came back, held his serve to take it to the tiebreaker, and then the kind of a masterclass Nagal put it in the tiebreaker. Absolutely outstanding. I mean, one of the biggest days in Indian tennis, I'll say, because after 35 years, you've had a singles male player beat a seeded player in the main draw of a Grand Slam. The last time it happened was Ramesh Krishnan way back in 1989 when he
Correct.
beat Mats Wilander. So 35 years is what it's taken. For Nagal, I know it's the second time he's made it to the second round. He made it to the second round of the US Open as well, but at that time
Yeah.
did not beat a seeded player. To beat a seeded player and make it here, I think it's incredible. What a great start to the day. One of those, um, moments that you'll remember for a very long time.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're looking at it, even I thought, once he lost that third, or once he lost that second set, once he won that second set, but once he reached that third set, really, where it was at a point wherein he, ended up taking it to the tiebreak, and the tiebreak really was the key part. Because again, if you're looking at that tiebreak thing, again, I thought he seemed to be actually with Nagal once he reached the tiebreak. I was worried at the tiebreak because I thought it looked like he was kind of done. His stamina was running out, and I don't blame him entirely. This will be the first time up against a player of this level, someone who consistently plays the Grand Slams versus someone who, up until last year, was mostly playing ITF Challenger level tours. Whole lot of difference between even that and ATP tours, and to then take it to the tiebreak, ensure that he actually pushed Bublik to the limit to the point where I think the match finished with a double fault. So it wasn't even, it was a meek surrender in that sense from Bublik. And even Bublik, though, at one point, I don't think, and again, I could be speculating here, but I think he expected a way easier match than he got. He definitely at one point looked like there were times when he won a couple of points, went on a roll, and you could tell from his body language a lot of aggression that, I'm putting this unseeded player or this player who's not even ranked within the top 100 in his place. Nagal just very relentless, and that was actually very good to watch because again, I was worried that he'd lose the tiebreak. Then once he lost the tiebreak, I thought the more experienced player, someone, and Bublik is again, I think he's 31 years old, has been there and thereabout, won 3 singles titles, someone who definitely, I wouldn't consider him a great level player, but again, if you're ranked 27 in the world, you have to be doing something right. And I think for Nagal, this will be probably the biggest achievement of his career. Previous, of course, being that one set he took off Federer in 2019.
Yeah, but if you look at Bublik, because you talk about how he came into this game. See, the first two sets he was clearly perturbed. I mean, you could make out that he wasn't comfortable. I think that wind that you had was troubling
Hmm.
him. He kept complaining about the ball toss while he was serving. Even for when he was going to be playing his forehands, backhands, he was saying that the wind is taking the ball a little away or bringing it much closer. So he's not really getting his, timing right of the shots. He kept complaining. But then, as the commentators pointed out, that win was there for even a Nagal. In fact, would have been for the other 12, 13 courts at the Australian Open where matches were happening. So every player needs to find a way to deal with it. I thought Bublik let that, dominate his mind. And you could clearly see that he wasn't trying, hitting those balls to the net, missing a lot of his shots, not being able to play long rallies. So he was clearly perturbed, as you saw with that. I think when he lost the second set, he broke the racket. He threw it down, broke it, got a court violation for that as well. So you saw he was frustrated and kept talking to his coaches as well. So you knew that he was troubled. But then a player with the experience of Bublik, with the age on his side, 31st seed. I mean, there would have been many times in his career where he's had to go through and fight the elements and come out on top. So I was a bit surprised that here he found it tough. But let's not take anything away from Nagal, because maybe Bublik may have had issues, but if you look at Nagal, he was actually nailing the shots. What you see in a good player was that one, he was matching him stroke to stroke, as in you could see that power in his forehand, especially in Nagal's forehand. The power that he was generating was incredible, and was hitting the lines. So he was making Bublik run around a lot. So either going straight down the line or cross court, he did it continuously. So even if Bublik wanted to make a comeback, there were a few occasions where he hit a good shot or two and thought, oh, this will be a winner for me. But Nagal not only returned those shots, but even returned them even more powerfully. So I think that also took him by surprise. And if someone, I mean, yes, he looked a bit lethargic on the court while he was complaining. But if you're telling me that he came to this match unprepared, that'd be a shocker for me. Because yes, he's playing a guy whose ranking is beyond 100, so more than 100 ranking difference between Bublik and Nagal, and he's still come to the match unprepared. Then it's a bit of a shocker, because even if the ranking gap is so much, that professional players today, when they go onto the field, whoever the opponent, and remember, Nagal came into this draw having not lost a single set in qualifying. So clearly, this is something that Bublik would have known. So you do your homework, you do your preparation, you look at his strength. It seemed like he had come a bit unprepared, which is again shocking. And if it was the case, then probably he deserved to lose. But even if he had come prepared today, Nagal was a beast. He was a beast on the court. Those forehands, the power in those forehands, and the way he was hitting them consistently to the edges, whether cross court or down the line, was incredible. Even if Bublik did not have those complaints, I think Nagal would have still given him a fight. So outstanding performance from Nagal. But one thing I really want to mention, Shane, here about Nagal. It was just 4 months ago, and we covered that story on Sports Today. Just 4 months ago, Nagal, who is India's #1 singles player, came out and said that he had less than 900 euros in his bank account and he's not living a very good life. 4 months later, he comes to the first Grand Slam he's playing after that. After he comes out in the Open and reveals he doesn't have too much money. 4 months later, wins the first round, goes into the second round. First Indian man in 35 years to beat a seeded player in the main draw. Go to the second round, which is his best performance. He's gone to the second round in the US Open once. I think, maybe when you hit rock bottom, when you're at that stage, that you can only go up from there. And I think he's just showing us that that's exactly what, he did. I think he came determined, saying that, he can't go any worse than that. And he has to, push on from there. That's not the kind of life that he wants to live. And if he has to push on from there, he'll have to be winning a lot of slams. And this is one good thing about tennis. Every round that you win, it's not that you have to win the title. Every round that you win, you get richer by a lot of dollars. And I'm so happy for Nagal that he would get richer. I mean, of course, you'd hope for him to win the next round and go forward. But just winning this round will make a huge financial difference to him, who he was at the moment struggling with his finances anyway.
Yeah, I mean, see, the thing with tennis, and I think this is something which I think a lot of our family members also may or may not be aware, but the sport of tennis is actually pretty brutal in some ways, at least in the finances, because again, none of these players are contracted to anyone. They are in essence what you'd refer to as independent contractors. So it's very meritocratic also in some ways, in the sense that the more you win in terms of tournaments, the higher your ranking goes, and the better it is your chances of course, getting a good draw, making it to slams on a consistent basis. But for those who are on the bottom half, it's a tough life. I mean, you are in essence paying not only for your travel, your stay, wherever it is your travel, you're also paying for the stay, travel of your coaches, your physios, whatever small team you may have. On top of that, then there and thereafter, you often reach a point where you may not actually be, let's say, winning that much, or you might not have the funding. Again, it's a lot of money involved. And of course, only when you are in tournaments, in those top bracket tournaments, whether they're in ATP level, whether they're in even Grand Slams, it's only then that you can potentially get that money to reinvest the money into yourself. It's very, all self-centric, which is of course the case with individual sports. So with Nagal, that story we referred to, of course, where he said, no, 900 euros in my bank account, not living the best of life. Since then, of course, I think he got a couple of partners on hand. as well. But full credit to him, he could have ended it there and said, okay, I've got some support. Maybe I'll continue competing at the lower levels or do what a lot of Indian singles promising stars do, which is turn to doubles. He hasn't done that. He's continued working hard on his singles career, has against all odds made it through not only to the qualifiers through the qualifiers into the main draw, now into the second round as well. Obviously he's set for a big let's say financial windfall, but I think now at this point you're not fancied to win anything beyond maybe a second round. I think you should just go for it, play freely, and try and maybe win a few fans over, because again, you're getting that exposure. Now's the best time. Go out there, make the best of it. No one would have said that he would even been able to beat a Bublik, because again, unranked, an unseeded player ranked outside the 100s up against someone ranked in the top 30. You're never giving the player ranked above 100 a chance. He's done it, and not only done it, but done some straight sets. At this point, I'd love to see him, and I think we know potentially, I think it'll be Jerry Cheng or Mackie McDonald that he will be facing. It's the winner of that particular match that he will be facing, and if things go
Are
well, could
those seeded
potentially
players? Any seeded players out of the two that you mentioned?
let me actually check that, because I think one of them at
Check
least
that.
might be.
Yeah,
I'll just
check it. No
that.
problem. No problem.
Yeah.
Meanwhile,
So
let me tell our subscribers while Shane is checking that while we are
neither of them are, by the way. Neither of them
okay,
are.
great. So that makes it slightly easier now. Second round. By the way, nothing comes easy in a Grand Slam. You know that. But I'm saying relatively easier to the opponent that he got here. So for him to win the second round, making into the third round would be incredible. Again, would financially also would be quite rewarding. We mentioned it earlier. Many thought that he would get the wild card because he's India's number one. You could have given him a wild card, but the Australian Open organizers decided not to give him the wild card. Had to do the tough job of going through qualifiers. And by the way, qualified with winning those 3 qualifier matches without losing a set. So he's been in incredible form. And with that in form, beating a 31st seed, you'd fancy him against an unseeded player now in round 2. So that's again good news.
But of course, you have to remember, I think if you're going to have to be that person and try and hope he gets one person, you would hope he doesn't get a Mackie McDonald. Because again, I don't know if you remember it, but this is the same guy who beat Nadal last year in straight sets. Granted, it was an injured Nadal.
But injured Nadal, yeah.
But this is the same guy who actually had beaten Nadal. So, of course, he's not ranked, but I think he would be higher than Nagal as well in the rankings, considering everything. Of course, no opponent will be easy the further you make it.
Yeah, but again, because we were talking about his financial situation, let's not forget on the day that we're celebrating a player of certain individuals that stood by him, and I know that Mahesh Bhupathi is one of those guys who backed him from a very young age, because he doesn't come from a very affluent background, came from very humble background, but he got all the financial support from someone like a Mahesh Bhupathi. So he's instrumental in making sure Nagal becomes the player that he is. Also, the Virat Kohli Foundation identified him pretty early and funded him. So he is the same player. I think he made a tennis court in a farmland in jo khet hote hai, on that he had made a clay court and practiced. From there he's come from back of beyond. From there to reach now where he has again. Baby steps. It's not that he's on a Grand Slam, but baby steps. But where Indian tennis is, and especially in singles, doubles we still have tasted a lot of success, especially in singles. So I think it's a day to celebrate. It's a big day for Indian tennis for sure.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, if you're looking at you have to look at the broader picture. Sure, him making it to the second round might not seem like a lot, especially when the favorites you support, you expect them to be making it at least to the quarters or semis, but then he's not at that level yet. And when you consider just how much India has underachieved in the sport of tennis in singles for decades at this point. I mean, we're just talking about the fact this is the first time in 35 years that an unseeded Indian player has beaten a seeded Indian player in men's singles. It tells you just how barren really the lay of the land has been as far as success in singles is concerned. And whether we like it or not, it's an unpopular thing to say, but singles is where the eyeballs are. It's where the razzmatazz is, where the big money is at. You don't become a true great by playing doubles consistently. So you've always needed those players to kind of step up and maybe have a splash singles. You've had a few players who you thought could have done it. Yuki Bhamri was very good at junior level. Unfortunately, his career kind of fizzled at the senior level. There was Ramkumar Ramanathan. So there were players there, but I think Sumit Nagal could very well be that person who, at least, I don't think anyone has won a ATP level as well, even since Somdev. Correct me if I'm wrong, but even that's been a very, very long time. It's been over a decade at this point.
Yep, yep. But interesting. Second round, we'll be keeping an eye out on. Plenty of Australian Open action anyway. All those updates you'll get on Sports Today. So we'll leave it at that. Thanks for giving us company. If you want to take any comments, you can, Shane.
Let's see. I mean, we can take a couple. There were some interesting ones. I mean, see, that's what Johnny Garaman is saying. He's saying that if he crosses through to round 3, if he can beat the winner of Mackie McDonald and Jerry Shank, then it's Alcaraz. I mean, even playing against an Alcaraz would probably be a massive thing for him, considering how many people will be actually watching that particular match.
Yeah, it'll be a spectacle. We'll watch it. At least, you're not expecting him to win, but at least watching it. That'll be fun.
And King D is saying, explain this in cricket terms. King D, this is like when Afghanistan beat England in the ICC World Cup. Put it that way. Probably bigger.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's it. There are many repeat comments, unfortunately.
Okay. See you then later in the day with Dugout. Yep. Bye-bye.
Absolutely.